Good morning, everybody. Oh, good morning. Good afternoon, even, everybody. Welcome to this webinar from the ASFP on future guidance, forthcoming guidance in passive fire. People are still coming in with attendees are still arriving, so we'll wait for a couple of minutes and we'll give it a start shortly. Okay, thank you. Okay, so attendees numbers seem to have settled off. So without further ado, let's go. Let's get on with it, and then we can get up and we can go through the content, etc., etc. For those of you, and I've looking at the names that have dialed in. There's a few of you who were with us yesterday while we were doing with it one of our industry leaders sessions on structural steel and on smoke control systems, but you will recognize quite a bit of this because you've seen some of this from yesterday. But here we go. So basically, it's our standard webinar, except for the fact that on this particular occasion, I haven't put any polls in there to save you all from that. But we've still got questions that are open via Q&A, and there is a chat box if you want to interact with us on that. And I might ask for some feedback at some point. It's via the chat box in there. And I'm going to rattle through the presentation, hopefully within just less than an hour. Question and answers as time allows, and then we'll sum up and close. And there's a couple of parish notices at the very end for you all in terms of upcoming events. But the other thing to remind you all, for those of you who've joined us today, that this webinar has got an ASFP CPD accreditation, and it's email info@asfp.org.uk. Georgina loves receiving these emails, and she will send you back a CPD certificate. And the usual caveat is that we record this webinar, and if you're watching this webinar on Catch Up TV, unfortunately, we cannot do CPDs. You have to be live watching this at the moment, just after 12 o'clock on the 30th of April. And if you're watching it live, we've got you down as an attendee, even if you're playing Candy Crush on your telephone, and we can go from there. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is there's an awful lot of stuff we're doing at the moment. There's an awful lot of our guidance notes and advisories that need to change. Why? Well, because we've got a time of flux. There's an awful lot of things going on out there in the wider world that means that our advice needs a bit of looking at and some on development. We've got a number of publications in development in various areas: structural steel, dampers and ducts, reaction to fire we'll talk about. And then I want to move on and talk about service penetration seals especially, and that feeding into design work. And we'll a few bits about other bits and pieces at the end. Okay. So I say it's a time of flux. There's a number of key things that have happened since September last year. And at September last year, Grenfell Tower Inquiry, Martin Moore-Bick published the Phase 2 report that found that the deaths at Grenfell were, as we can kind of expected, completely avoidable, and that there would be various things. Beyond that, we had the announcement from government about the removal of recognition of 476 tests from ADB. And we're now moving into an area where construction product regulations are being revised and changed. We've been talking about this for the last 7 or 8 years. Well, in December, the European Commission adopted the new European CPR. And in February, our government, not only did they publish a response to the Grenfell 2 inquiry, but they published a green paper on construction product reform in the UK. So let's look at how all that might or might not affect our ASFP advisories. Grenfell Tower Public Inquiry made 58 recommendations, and although most of those were for government and local authorities, 8 of them were relevant to areas concerning ASFP. And I'll be honest, it didn't really build on Hackett, Morell and Day, except for the fact that because they were covering different things, they were covering test lab and certification bodies, and government committed to responding to those in 6 months. So it was basically the industry at that point said, right, okay, well, we'll wait and see what government is going to do. Okay, and we'll do that. We did that, and we waited because from September we were talking about we were expecting to see publication in March. One of the things that happened very, very shortly after was government also announced that they were going to withdraw BS 476 for recognition from ADB. In terms of reaction to fire, that was to happen within 6 months, and the 2nd of March 2025 was the deadline. So that's now happened. From a fire resistance standpoint, we were given a 5-year transition period, so that's with effect from the 2nd of September 2029. Now, BSI has produced an article that explains what the BSI's status is and what BSI is going to do with BS 476. The picture of the article is on screen in front of you, and if you are wanting to zap that QR code will take you straight through the internet to the BSI website and that article, just to provide modern technology at its best. Niall and I were heavily involved in helping Ian and Chris at BSI writing that article. Basically, as it stands at the moment, BSI has fully withdrawn the reaction to fire standards. So tests like Part 6, Part 7 are now fully withdrawn. And BSI has amended in December last year, amended the forewords for the fire resistance tests, Part 2024, to say that they will be withdrawn fully by BSI as of the 2nd of September 2029. Okay, just leave that there for a few seconds if any of you want, regarding, so that you can have a look at, if you want to just zap that QR code. Okay. Next one on the list, and you're all going to turn around and say, why is this relevant? The EU has been talking about amending its construction products regulations for around about 7 or 8 years now, if not even more. May even be more than 10 years that this review of EU construction products regs has been going on, because I'm fairly certain I was still at Leeds when I went to the first meeting on it. And that has now been published. Much of it will remain the same, but one of the things, a lot of our products that we sell into around Europe are in the voluntary system, EAD, ETA, and that's outside the harmonised zone. So there is the possibility of countries still having national requirements. We are not, most of the fire protection products are not covered by a harmonised product standard. So, and it says they're unlikely to become a new product family. It's unlikely to become a new product family for about 4 or 5 years, but we have gone up the priority list from we aren't a priority to about number 18, 19, and we sort of been tied in now to gypsum products and mortars and mastics. So that there's a bit of a sense there. But one of the key things is that under the new European construction product regulation, there's an awful lot of new environmental sustainability indicators going to be introduced as part of product approvals. And there are also digital product passport requirements that are being brought in. There's your phased introduction of environmental and sustainability factors. First set coming in within about January next year include climate change effects, global warming potential indicators, and things like that. The second set with it on by January 2030, ozone depletion, acidification, eutrophication, water use. And then the third set, 27th of January 32, have things like particulate matter, radiation, ecotoxicity, human toxicity. One of the challenges there is the product standards will need lots of sampling and testing methods to be written. It's a scary amount of standards that will be needed just to write in support of that. Plus, national regulators will need to set their substance lists and their substance criteria. So there's work to be done there. And within digital product passports, basically the Europeans are getting a version of a separate EU consumer legislation, which the delegated act created should be coming out in autumn. And then, so in other words, and then voluntary use write it within 6 months, and then voluntary use it for another 12. So it's going to be sometime around about 2027 by the time that this comes about. And this will include a digital product passport with your declaration of performance, with your instructions for use, with your product safety information, and that needs to be free to access and to be maintained for a minimum of 10 years. Okay. Now, of course, please, can you just, there's a little slide to do first, but can you just remember all that stuff, because we're going to come back and talk about what the UK is going to do with the European stuff in a minute or two. So end of February, government produced, as they said they would, a response to the phase 2 more BIC requirement. They accepted as best they could all 58 recommendations, although some they notably accepted only in principle. One of the key concerns there was going to be a new construction regulator responsible for assessing and publishing product conformity info. And what we were worried was that one of the things that we were worried was that the regulator, it was going to be that the regulator was, the more BIC proposal was that the regulator was had oversight over everything, and it was almost like a going back to nationalisation of fire testing. That one's not. What will end up is that the regulator will be involving licensing conformity assessment bodies. So there's sort of the regulator will have a role for product conformity assessment bodies alongside UCAS. And so there's going to be a bit of how the regulator does what the regulator does at the same time of working alongside UCAS, doing what UCAS will do. And there's going to be various other bits and pieces. One of the big challenges is that the government the response says that government will demand publication of test results that is there in support of a product certificate. And one of the things that we're going to advocate is that you don't need test reports to be published in support of a certificate, but maybe they should be logged somewhere, so that if needs be, we can review them at a later stage. And one of the other concerns for us in there is a requirement to provide regulator with test data beyond that in certification. Again, we're not quite keen on that. The same day that happened and that came out, we also saw construction products regulations green paper published. I mean, it looks like it's on white paper, but it's a green paper. And that's a consultation with 58 questions, and that closes at the end of May. So you've got a smidge over 3 weeks to get your responses in. ASFP advocates that as if you are a manufacturer of construction products, one of our manufacturer members, please submit your response to this. It's very, very important. One of the biggest things in here, big change in emphasis, is safety critical. We talked in the past about what safety critical, and that it was changed from safety critical to products critical to safe construction, which sounds like, initially just sounds like word soup. It's the same thing but called slightly differently, but it's not. It's actually quite a significant change. Products critical to safe construction recognizes that there is going to be a requirement for products to be covered by a national or recognized standard that supports safe installation. So with for products critical to safe construction, design, installation, and use potentially come into scope. Okay. So as a result of that, it's not the current construction product regulation ends at the factory gate. The manufacturer makes the product, he ensures that the product is the same as it's ever been, and that product leaves the factory on with guaranteeing it's the same performance as it has previously, consistency of performance. Well, now there is the possibility that this is going to go further, and this is going to consider design, installation, and use. What I would say there is that we've talked in the past about a three-tranche approach for construction products reform. All construction products are going to come under this general risk-based safety requirement, and there is a new code of practice for risk assessing construction products being drafted by BSI. That's PAS 2000. Draft public comment in summer, publish in February, and beyond that, there is still the mandatory compliance for the stuff that's got designated standards, and the designated British standards will remain aligned to the reformed European regime. So government thinks it's got the ability and the authority to bring in any European environmental sustainability requirements and digital product platform passport requirements. They're all going to come in. Okay, they're all going to be brought in. So hence why I was saying to you about the European stuff, be mindful of it and watch it, because under the current government, they are seeking to reset the relationship with the European Union and look at it from that point of view. One of the things we've already talked about is the fact that beyond that, there were going to be additional measures for things outside the current regulatory framework, products critical to safe construction. But I have heard in the last week questions being raised about whether the UK may be in a position to apply the same product critical to safe construction type regulation and procedures to stuff within the current European regulatory framework, the current designated standards. And I'll be honest, I've got a conversation I'm having with MHCLG this afternoon, and that's one of my 3 or 4 questions that I'm going to be asking them. Okay, if you think there's anything that I should be asking of MHCLG when I sit down with them this afternoon, there's a Q&A in the chat box function. Just ping them down, and if I can, then we will see what you've done. If you've got any questions for MHCLG, send them in. Okay, just one last thing, and those of you who've read this would have expected me to put this slide up. Because I've been doing it, because it's a bit of a recognition for us. One of the things that we've been doing with our certification bodies is trying to set minimum standards for the certification schemes for product and for installer. The installer work is a little bit further ahead than the product standard, and so we've got some stuff going to be coming out in support of this in the near future, and we're looking at trying to generate stuff on that. Okay, and that was recognized in the sorry, I've just noticed the question and answer. Yes, Chris, you're quite right. We've been recognized for trying to develop better schemes, and we're going to carry on with that work. So how does this affect ASFP guidance? Well, the first casualty is our orange book. Our orange book is the reaction to fire guide, reaction to fire coating systems. We have basically had to withdraw it because it gives advice on the use and etc. of Class O. So we've currently withdrawn it. I need to reconvene TG4. And I'll be honest, it's not met since before computers. I don't think it's met since 2010. Niall and I don't think it's met in neither my time as tech officer or indeed prior to that in Niall's time as tech officer. We're going back to Bill Parler and the box of papers down under my desk down here that probably parchment. What I would say to you is, if you are interested in getting involved in a task group on reaction to fire, stick something into the can you stick something into the webinar chat now, and we'll have a look at that, please. We also need to consider within that a project that the British Coatings Federation are running to produce a new thing called the Red Board. The picture at the bottom of the screen there is the ticket hall at King's Cross after the King's Cross fire, and one of the things that had obviously massively contributed to that fire was the layers and layers and layers and layers of combustible previous paint. And one of the things that the coating industry set out to do after that was work out a test method, a test method for previous paint, for upgrading previous painted systems. And there was a thing called the Blue Book. A blue board was generated, and the blue board was done that it was something that burned very, very badly, and you could test a multi-layer product to upgrade multi-layer paint systems without having to remove it all. Okay, one of the challenges is that the blue board worked with BS476 part 6 and 7, which are now withdrawn tests. And the other is that the Health and Safety Police have taken out half the raw materials that used to be used in Blue Board. And so we need a new board that works and is relevant to the construction industry using currently available formulations. And that's what BCF are working on generating, and we're trying to help support them. We've just recently done an upgrade to some of the Yellow Book, and we need to finish off and deal with the rest of it. What did we do with the Yellow Book? Why did we do it? We decided that it was too complicated, too long, too intertwined with the fact that we had testing and assessment stuff in there, and they were all intermixed. So we split it into 3 volumes. Volume 1 for design, specification, installation, and the other 2 volumes will be to do with testing. We've had to change it because the design code that was in the Yellow Book, it used both BS 5950 and Eurocode 3, but to be honest, we're now moving over more to Eurocode 3, and we've removed and because a BS 5950 has been removed from approved document A, so we've moved over to Eurocode 3 as well. And one of the issues we had was in Yellow Book 5, we had various critical temperatures in there, not just 550, 620, but interlinked to the design code, the Eurocode and 5950, and different uses, and it was all very, 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 very complicated. And because it was all very, 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 very complicated, we've simplified it. And so we've simplified it, tied it into the National Annex of 1993, Part 1, Part 2, so we match approved document A. And we've done that with Volume 1. And our next challenge now within the Yellow Book is to work on Volumes 2 and 3. Because Volumes 2 and 3 contained a testing method and an assessment method that was used in conjunction with BS 476 tests. And BS 476 tests, obviously, we've been looking at revising the assessment methodology, but it's got a limited lifespan given the end of 476 is now September 2029. And the newer standards, BSEN 13381 Part 4 and 8, they already have an assessment method. So we can't do that. So volumes 2 and 3 have been delayed, but we think they're going to come soon, because certainly volume 2's got quite an advanced draft. I'm going to try and get that out. So the TG1 chair, Ian Bradley, is very, very keen. I don't know if Ian's on the call. Very, very keen to get that out as soon as we can. So we'll be working on that. Need to do a bit more on volume 3. And while we're at it, in structural steelwork, we've got all sorts of other bits and pieces to do. We've got to do some revalidation of the unfilled voids guide above, for where we've got a trapezoidal deck above a composite beam. And we've also got to do, I think we need to do, as ASFP, we need to do significant work to produce a more detailed advisory note covering secondary heat transfer from secondary sections, be that heat transfer on a compartment line, heat transfer across a compartment line, and heat transfer into a member in the middle of a room that's fully engulfed in fire. We have an advisory note 21 out there that covers one of those scenarios. It covers the scenario where you have a beam or a column in the middle of a room, and it ends up being fully engulfed in fire and is connected to an unprotected secondary section. The problem is that advice, because it only concerns one system, one situation, regularly gets misinterpreted and abused, and it's probably one of my least favorite technical questions that I get about once a month from somebody saying, I've used advisory note 21 for a piece of steel that crosses a compartment line, for which it's inappropriate. So there's a definite need there for further advice. We've got, I'll mention now to you while we're at it, in terms of publications, the Grey Book. I was getting a lot of grief yesterday, and I will be working on the Grey Book tomorrow to try and get those final drafts of these two documents out. Grey Book 3rd edition, volume 1 covers fire resisting dampers, and volume 2 covers smoke control dampers. And here's a lovely little picture of a smoke control system. How does a smoke control system work? That's going to be hopefully in Grey Book volume 2. One of the things I would say that Grey Book will heavily advocate against, and this is going to become a common theme as we go through, is mentioning the getting the correct terms right. Getting the correct terms and the correct terminology. One of the things here is we regularly see the term fire and smoke dampers, and that doesn't help. It doesn't mean anything, and it's a term that gets used and abused. Is it a fire resisting damper? Is it a fire resisting damper with a smoke leakage performance, or is it a smoke control damper, and to be used as part of a smoke control system that should need proper designing? So that's the sort of thing that we should that we need to consider, and that's the sort of thing that we're going to be doing a lot of over the next few months. Okay. Beyond that, we've got a number of things that the wider technical team has got involved in. Revision to colour books. We've got a 3rd edition of the purple book on fire resisting petitions is quite a developed draft. We're working on a new blue book, EN volume 2. Blue book BS at the moment. Obviously, the blue book has two sides. It has a British standard side and a European BSEN side. The BSEN just tells you how to test. The old BS 476 document tells you how to test, but then also has a series of calculations and things you can use in a volume 2 about how you will develop and how you can take that data and apply it into real designs. And we are producing a new version of a new volume to the European that's an equivalent guide and equivalent document. We've also got colour books where TGs have started work on clear book on fire resistant glazing, which is a reasonably well developed, got a good structure and working on it. A green book on fire doors, which again has got a good structure and is looking forwards, and the gold book on golden thread, where we've got some more stuff to do. And each of the TGs is looking at producing a lot of advisory notes, and here's my sort of my base list. Beyond that, TG1's got a yellow book. Apart from the fact that we said we're working on yellow book 2, we've got an advisory on the scope and assessment and use of assessment methodology in products, advisory note on assumptions behind the new yellow book 6 text that we're working together. TG3's asked for an advisory on cold smoke and open state cavity barriers. We need to amend TGD19, the test method for open state cavity barriers, now that a nod to the fact that the EN 1364 part 6 has been published. This is an interesting, very, very little one that we've been published. We're working on with TG6. The new advisory note 37, don't use tech screws for breakaway joints dampers. OPSS have been heavily lobbying us to do this and almost create a labeling system where dampers have this label on, that the label takes you back to this advisory advising don't use self-drilling metal screws, don't use tech screws within in damper joints, and make sure you're using the appropriate fixings as necessary. TG9's written a note about wants a note about software choice protocols to drive the software choice earlier into the contractual chain, and a thought about that. And TG10, there's discussion, and TG10 meets, the fire doors group meets tomorrow, and they're talking about the possibility of drawing up an advisory note covering the definitions of the term notional and nominal fire doors, which gets used especially in healthcare type scenarios. Beyond that, we've got an awful canon of documentation out there, some of which is quite old and some of which needs looking at. So we are going to be, over the next 6 months, 12 months, and if you've been to one of our TGs already this year, process has started. We're looking at historic documentation, asking for comments back. So for instance, this is our attached on the screen is our advisory note 2, fire stopping of combustible pipes with an internal diameter of 40 millimeters or less. We circulated that around TG3 a couple of months ago. Interestingly, this has also come up recently, earlier this week at Passive Fire Knowledge Group, and lots of clamour from people to amend that advisory note to say, to be far stricter in the fact that we only recognise from ADB the approach alternative A, provide a proprietary sealing system. The table 9.1 that we see below, which has come straight out of ADB this morning, it's still there, and in actual fact the text in Scotland is even more allowing of stuff to happen. It says that we could have a 40 mil pipe, and you can actually put a bundle and cluster of 40 mil pipes next to one another to create a whomping great hole that will burn away in 5 minutes, 10 minutes in a fire. And leave large, and we get upset about gap gauges, about 3 millimeter gaps. You fail something on a gap gauge at 3 millimeters, but you can have a 40 mil pipe according to ADB. So that's something that we're going to be looking at and talking to further conversations with HSE about again, I'm sure. One of the key things that we need to develop, this will be new to those of you who weren't with me yesterday, because yesterday was the first time we've done some of this. It's been called for an overarching code of practice for design. Our industry leaders meetings, we've had lots of discussions about how we design. And one of the things we did following the first one of these meetings was November 23, and we set 3 work streams off. They all came back. You said, you need a better design guide. So we wrote a thing called Advisory Note 33. And Advisory Note 33 has been published. It encourages earlier design. It says, you know, if you do the standard contractor design portion where you build the whole, you put the services through, and then you expect somebody to come along and fire stop it, you're going to ask for trouble. So collaborate on the design to do it, and do it earlier, so that therefore the design that's possible can be built. And if you record the design and the construction, then you've dealt with the Hackett gateways. And we publish this, and what's happened is we've still got the architectural community asking us for a set of guidelines for when they don't follow Advisory Note 33. Well, why not? Well, because we can't. So with a bit of reluctance with TG3 members, we are working on providing a set of guidelines that might sort of recognise and give you a series of designs and conditions and constraints that will get you there. But it is, this new working document's got a title, AN38. We're working on it, but it has to be heavily caveated. You know, you see there's a large section of text there at the bottom of this that says, and the introduction says, don't do it this way, use Advisory Note 33. The position says, following these recommendations is no guarantee of doing it. So that's why. And one of the problems is, of course, that people are, we had a problem that design was not something that we looked at in the competence framework. Well, we have done now. I gave one group in the past a challenge of trying to come back with some competence in design stuff, and it was a bit of a pain. It came back and said it's very difficult. So we put a group together. We got that group is meeting, and that group has started. And this is one of Kate's slides on that. And what Kate says is, look, let's set the standard. Let's define what competent looks like. Then let's determine the routes to competence. So what qualifications, what training, what skills, what knowledge, what experience, what behaviors, how do you achieve that? And we'll do that. And this first box, setting the standards, the functional map and the SCEB statements, I don't know whether you were all aware, but we've done it. It's published. And if you go on the ASFP website and you go into the competence framework, now there is all these things. There are all these design specification things set up. So you can have a look at what those SCEB statements look like, and if you've got any comments on them, you know, have a look, have a think, and feedback to us accordingly. They're there. They're not they're set in a fairly soft, malleable sandstone, but they can be changed. Okay. Please have a look at that. So why did one of the key questions then for that group next will be how you do it and who does it. And with that in mind, I suppose the question is, if we're still being asked for this development guide, this advisory note, that to get around the fact that people don't want to follow Advisory Note 33, why? Why is it that we need something else that's a heavily caveated document? Why isn't our Advisory Note 33 enough? And the answer is because it tells you what to do, not how to do it. And here we go. This means that what we need to do is produce a massive overarching design guide that tells you not just the what to do, but also the how to do it. And one of the challenges for that I've come to realize in going through this process is I don't necessarily speak the same language as the construction industry and the architectural industry. They have a different set of languages in REBA plan of works, or in CIBS's commissioning management type things. And the people who set the services out they speak BESA. So if those people are speaking different languages to me, how can we change what we say and put it in the frame of language that they do? I don't know whether he's on the call, whether he's on the thing, the webinar today, but work has been heavily, I'll say heavily influenced. It's been done by a guy called Paul McSorley, who many of you will know. from that side of the world, and Paul's been helping us with this. And basically what we've done is we started by mapping the construction process, and you've got REBA plan of works and the Hackett gateways and what happens through site, and we've got all that, we put all that together, and how all these things flow from box to box to box. And one of the challenges that we've looked at is who does what and when. And one of the things we get confused, this process regularly gets confused about, and I've said this before in preparing advisory note 33, is not necessarily the what to do, it's the who does it and who has responsibilities. And in that, we need to recognize that there are distinct roles, and some of those roles have legal responsibilities. And we're back to one of my car analogies. You know, if I am a principal contractor or a principal designer, I have legal responsibilities under the Building Safety Act. Somebody else will also have some, contractor might also have some, designer might also have some legal responsibilities under CDM. And I can't necessarily subcontract myself away from that legal responsibility. I cannot go to a taxi driver and say to the taxi driver, drive me to Coventry at 200 miles an hour and don't worry about the fines, I'll pay them, because he'll end up in prison. It won't be me. The law will look upon that. The law is on the taxi driver, not on me. Okay, so we've looked at what all the legal requirements are for all the different people, including the principal designer looking at Building Safety Act, the principal designer looking at CDM, and all those sorts of things, and who has to do that. And you will notice that a lot of the first requirements are sat with the client. Okay, so we've been looking at this and trying to work this out and trying to what this design guide will look like. And for the purposes of that, there's a whole host of different products that we're going to look at, and it's all the standard stuff that you would need. And therefore, each of these products is going to need some sort of, at some point, we're going to get to you, we'll go through, we're going to see, we're going to need checklists, and we're going to need lots of checklists about how you design all these things. But this document isn't necessarily just about how you design it, but it's about who and about how the thing gets set up. So we took this from the CIBSE guide, and Paul pointed out, he said, right, look, the construction industry already is used to the concept of having somebody that manages a team of people doing something. This is what happens in commissioning management from CIBSE Code M. So what we did was we took it and we pinched the same, and we created a new role, Fire Protection Systems Manager. And the guide recommends getting somebody appointed in this role, and that then run and manage ultimately a fire protection review team designed, compiled of people relevant to getting the project delivered in a fire safe way. Okay, so there is a new role, and we're going to go back with one of the things we need to do is go back to our design and competence people and say, can we look at that, and can we make sure that we need these two roles in there, and we need competence requirements for what these two roles are going to do. We put in there, and I'm going to canter through these very, very quickly, three structures for fire protection system manager, who would appoint them, how they would be appointed, etc., etc. And we've got within the design guide, you know, the contractual arrangement between the fire protection system manager, the PD, the PC, the client, etc., etc. And there are subtly different arrangements that may or may well happen. And we'll publish, I said, when the document comes out, we'll give you more time to have a look at these. We've also created, because it's by popular demand, a RACI model, and a design responsibility matrix along the lines of who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted, and who is informed as we go through the process, through each of the REBA plan of work stages within each of the boxes that we put there. And so we've done that, and I suppose that's one of the key things, is each of those boxes is represented by a box in this flowchart, which I have used shamelessly in the past, but now there's a means to it and an end to it. And what you will see is that some of the terms will start to make sense, because if I zoom in on concept REBA 2 concept design, lo and behold, establish the building fire protection review team. So it's at this point that we appoint our fire protection safety systems manager, and we get that team going quite much earlier in the contractual process than has happened in the past. Okay. And one of the things that team needs to do is it needs to go through and decide what the building is, and make sure that we have a proper strategy and a proper series of information on which to base the building design. When we get into the next stage at spatial coordination, and this is where there was an element going through this process with Paul where I turned around and said, establish descriptive performance for product fire protection system terms of it. What's descriptive performance? You've made that up. We're going to have to define it. And it's here as well. Confirm prescriptive products. What descriptive, prescriptive, where does that come from? At which point Paul pointed me and says, well, actually, descriptive design is a REBA term. So that's what I'm trying to say with this document is coming forwards. This is what we're trying to do. We will be trying to get people to put it into the terminology that the REBA designers use, and so descriptive design, define what it is you're trying to achieve. The key for expression here is design intent, and that's set here in concept design and spatial coordination. What are we trying to achieve? Okay. And so we've used that and defined that and put that into our own descriptive version of this and what it means. And this is text that will be in the draft guide. But in effect, and again, you can tell this is taking information from Paul McSorley, because in effect what it does is it takes us through this process. It says what's the building fire safety requirements? Have we got people sleeping or not? Have we got people that can't get out? What's the fire safety requirement? Okay, and you don't just need to consider in here part B, but if for a damper you need to consider part L, part O. Have you got the power for it, part P, and all that sort of malarkey. And that will take us to a classification statement that we need. And we know that once we've got that, we also need to consider what the supporting construction is and how we're going to how it's going to be installed and what type of access we've got to it to do it. And what we're trying to do is plan as much of this as we can here early before we get and in this stage here, the technical design, because once you've got that, then you've got a proper good description of what you're trying to achieve, then the specification of what you're trying to achieve, which is the prescription, as REBA would say, that becomes about from that. And that also means that we've got a route through this, going through the design. We've got to, if we're going to change the description, we've got a loop to go back to change the description accordingly. So if we can't achieve it, what do we do? Do we change the description in some way, shape or form? Do we change the risk register? Do we change the description of what we're trying to achieve to help us work in some way, shape or form? So we've got lots and lots of things in, and the project strategies that we see in technical design are going, they may well have to go back, but we're trying to use the terminology that REBA gives us, and so therefore prescriptive design. Okay, so now if we have a description, the description tells us what to do, and the prescription tells us how we're going to do it. I go to the doctor, I say, I describe my symptoms, and he gives me a prescription to how to fix it. And so that's why, and some of these things some of these prescriptions may well need to come from the fire protection manufacturers and the suppliers. Some of them may come from the specialist contractors. It depends what we're doing and where we're going. Okay, but so we've got definitions of that, and in there we've got all sorts of fancy flow charts. We're going to say, well, this is a development document, but we need to bring this out rapidly, and this takes us through a way to set the client, the contractual chain up, to hold a kickoff meeting and what to discuss, to come up with the descriptions, to hold the meetings, to develop the prescription, identify where you have problems, and then go loop back round. And if not, then once everything's sorted, go through and build it. And so and I'm conscious of the fact there's a lot of stuff in there, but there will be a consultation we'll be doing on this as we continue to develop it. I've already mentioned this. There will be a lot of checklists needed for this, an awful lot of checklists needed for this. Okay, so please we'll be working with our individual TGs on what these checklists look like as well. And what we've tried to do within this is, one of the things we've tried to do is simplify this bit here, right? Because we do, within what we do is, when we're making it, when we're building it, we just build it. We have got loops back if we need to change it. And in an ideal world, or if we have a problem on site, we change the prescription. We don't change the description. Okay, but we change the prescription. Okay. And that's, and he said, now I do remember, I'm trying to remember what Paul told me those were. That's a whole way through a change management process as we move through the construction system, aligned to REBA plan of works. And at the end of it, hopefully, we've got the records of what we've done, and we can hand those over, and therefore we get through Gateway 3, and permission to occupy is achieved much easier. And that will be all the Sisyphus text that we will see, and all the information that's in there. That will take us into the gold book, and there'll be some information. This will tie in with the stuff that's in the information that's going to be in the gold book. Okay, and of course, once the building's in use, we will have a review. We need to have a review of what we've done to make sure. And so there's, again, tied in. It ties in with where we are within REBA plan of works. So basically, we have a draft text, and we need some volunteers to help peer review it. It's about 130 pages long. I had half a dozen volunteers from yesterday. Again, if you're interested, I don't want too big a panel. I'm trying to keep it, and we will do that. So that's the sort of stuff that we're doing at the moment. And this one will be a massive piece of work, because I want to get this out and get this into the industry, and try and get round the fact that people can work on this. Okay. And I knew I was going to see that last question that was going to be there. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, and so from that gets us pretty much to the end of my slides, and takes me to question and answers. I hope what I've tried to do there is give you a flavour of all the stuff that we're working on, and a flavour of all the bits and pieces that we've been working on. And this design guide will be one of the biggest things going forwards. I've got a few minutes. I'll try and have a look at some of the Q&A. I can see I've got 13 questions. There's a couple of them about the CPD certificates. I'll put the address up. You need to email the office. I will put the address on the screen now. Sorry, on the next slide. Again, ask MHCLG how they intend to enforce regulations as trading standards cannot do it. Like that. Thank you very much. Thank you for those volunteering to help with TG4. I'll have a look. If you are employed by a member organisation, a member company, then we can sort that one out. With review of the Yellow Book, what does this mean for the technical guidance notes for mixed board and reactive coatings guidance notes? The answer is, at the moment, those guidances are still the one where regarding system overlap is still correct. We will have a look at, but we will be having a look at that and making sure that those provisions are correct. That's technical guidance note 8. There is scope to do some testing on boarded intumescent coatings, and that was something that we were discussing yesterday with a group, and whether we should use whether we should get some validation test evidence. So we'll do that. I thought 1364 part, when was EN 1364 part 6 published? That was about a couple of months ago, Chris. So we'll do that. That's been done. And does descriptive design not mean specification? No, I think descriptive design, I think it's, yes, possibly, but I'm using, does descriptive design mean specification? It may do. But what I am doing is I'm using the REBA terminology for it, so as to appeal to the REBA people, because they say they can't follow AN33. So we're putting it in terms they understand. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay, I've got about 2 minutes left. So I'll just do a quick reminder for you all. You've asked a number of people asking for the info on the ASFP CPD certs. Email us info@asfp.org.uk and we will send you the CPD certificate back. Okay. And a couple of upcoming events. Next week, we have our AGM and our technical seminar. And I'll put this one out to you because this might be of interest to some of you. One of the things that we're doing, we've got HSE to come down and talk about Gateway 2. And we're going to put on stage with HSE talking about Gateway 2. We've got a specialist contractor, a tier 1 contractor and a product manufacturer. And we're going to talk about, and an architect, to talk about experiences of Gateway 2, and then we're going to have a panel where we'll put them all on the same stage at the same time. So that should be interesting. Whether it will end up in which let's just say it'll be interesting. Whether it will end up as a boxing match or not, I don't know. And the other person speaking at that seminar is Louise Barr, who's the Deputy Director at MHCLG and one of the key movers and shakers on the Green Paper regarding construction product reform. So for once, we've got somebody from MHCLG coming to talk about construction product reform, and they've got something significant to talk about. So we've got all those speakers coming out and talking on those. I'm hoping for a really good day's speaking. And then the other one is that we are going on our holidays to Edinburgh for a day, and ASFP Roadshow. We're doing a seminar in Scotland on Tuesday the 20th of May, and we'll probably be doing something very, very similar, but we'll be talking about it from a Scottish point of view. Okay. And that's about and I'm going to say, and that's about all we've got. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for watching. If you want to have a look at this again, we don't tend to share PowerPoints, but the recording of this will go up. So if you want to go back through it and read some of those slides at your leisure and flick through and have a read of it rather than going through it at the speed I've just done, then please, it will be uploaded on the website as soon as possible. It's 1 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. That's your hour CPD well earned, and we'll see you all soon. Hopefully see some of you next week in that London. All right. Thanks very much, folks.